My name's Paul Oakley. I work for the BRE, and the BRE within the UK also run Building Smart UK, and we're also heavily involved with Building Smart International. I really want to talk to you about what's going on in terms of BIM Object Standards and attribute standards and how we're dealing with that. So a bit about me, open data standards, BIM Object Standards in terms of object naming, attribute, shape standards, and a tool that we're progressing called, which is BRE Active SPie, and how that will help the UK industry. So in terms of me, I'm an architect, about 10 years in local authority, similar sort of time, a couple of large practices as both architects, sort of CAD manager, etc. There's my first BIM project, carried out in AutoCAD Release 2. Okay. There had to be straight lines and not curves, because you couldn't do curves as extrusion in AutoCAD back in them days. Okay, so I've been doing 3D modelling for quite some time, and even back then, we were trying to link in with basic programming languages to extract data from CAD into basically databases, drive stuff back then. My knowledge has always been Autodesk-based stuff, so AutoCAD architecture, and Revit. I work as both as architect, CAD BIM manager, trainer, so trained for various resellers, Autodesk. Involved in a lot of stuff with writing standards, so a lot of British standards, but also stuff for object standards, various bits and pieces on those, implementations in companies, all sorts of stuff. Also an application developer, so I know it from the API side. I've done quite a lot in terms of developing for Revit on the back of that. I was one of the main sort of developers doing stuff within the UK when it first kicked off. In terms of industry groups, back to Teamwork 2000 with Mike and various other people, ADT Technical Group with various other people, a lot of the stuff which basically formed the basis of BIM Level 2 in terms of Avanti, CPIC, BS 1192. I sat on the PAS 1192 committee, co-author of 8541 Part 2, sat on 8541 3 and 4. I sit on the ISO 19650 committee, plus various other bits and pieces. Also sit on the board of Building Smart. So the BRE, on various services, we do certification training, so various research projects, and also sort of Building Smart UK and Ireland, so it all comes under our banner. So, talk about Open BIM standards. Well, some of you remember Stephen Hamill presented about MBS Create, and he showed his bath that he linked from a bath, extracted it out to Create, changed the size of his bath, and it didn't update the model. And because he couldn't link data from outside of Revit back into Revit, so he couldn't drive geometry, because he didn't know what parameters he needed to drive. And that's the problem we've got as an industry. Simple rectangle. What do I call those two parameters? Any ideas?
Length or width? Depends which one you think is length and which one you think is width.
Actually, A and B.
How do you spell length? There's a few people here on the ADT community group. So if you used AutoCAD architecture, or now, as it is now, ADT, you've got a basic box. Okay, so the parameters are built in. So on a box as a solid, the parameters are length and width. On a box as a mass element, it's width and depth. And these are Autodesk built-in parameters on the objects. So even then, and it's in one piece of software, even they can't get what they call the things of a rectangle to be the same thing. Okay, so in terms of, Revit, as you'll probably know, is case sensitive on the parameters. So whether you start with lowercase, uppercase, whether you misspell it, you add your bits or whatever, they're all different parameters. Something basic, simple in terms of description. So if somebody's added description from different shared parameters files or different content, you're going to get multiple description parameters, as Glynis was mentioned out, and other things into your models. What is interesting in the Revit API is it used to be get parameter name, because it returned one thing. Now it actually returns an array because it recognises it can return a list of different parameters with that name, all with different GUI IDs and that. So, you've got this big issue in terms of what we call things, and all this ideas of BIM level 3, Internet of Things, driving all this stuff, until we can sort out this basic thing of what we're going to call the sides of a rectangle, we haven't got hope. Okay, other simple things as insertion points when you're creating content. So if one bit of content's been created there, another one centre base, you swap one out for the other, and your piece of furniture is going to move. Okay, so within the UK, there's quite a lot of documents put out by different people and have been for some years. There's BS Standards 8541, Series 1, 2, 3 and 4. Globally, there's lots of standards all over the world, all doing different things, all looking at things differently. Now, this is the problem I have. I work for BRE. So something as simple as within BREEAM Eco Homes, you might have a requirement for the global warming potential on insulation. So all you want to check is this one value greater or less than 5? Okay, then I can award an accredit. Okay, so it shouldn't be that difficult to do, but the reality is, you've got a BREEAM requirement, you have to get the design data, retrieve all the BIM objects that could hold that, get the data, link it to manufacturers, and then check that that's compliant. But to do that, you need an object standard, because I need to make sure that the objects I'm getting are the objects I'm after. You need an attribute standard, so parameters in Revit terms. And then you need a product data template standard to make sure that the information you're getting from the manufacturer ties to that. Okay, then I can award my BREEAM or Eco Homes point. So part of the things we've been doing at the BREs, the BRE is a charitable organisation, they have a trust. So they basically set up projects and pay their staff to sort of do things. So one of the things I've been paid to do for the last 3 months is to write an international object standard based on what was agreed at the Build and Smart International meeting in Toronto, and I'm presenting it to the Build and Smart group next week, which is being held in Watford. I get all the great trips. I think they didn't let me go to Toronto, we had to go to Watford. But really we're looking at object naming standards, attribute naming and shape definitions. So if we can sort out these basic things and agree them globally, then we've got a fighting chance of getting all these things to tie in together. Okay, we're also looking at tying in with the product data template stuff, so Jose and Carl and that have been involved in doing that. Because basically what they're doing there is an attribute. But they're not, this is being done on a global basis, other countries and that are doing the same sort of things. You've got the ANZAR standards out in Australia, they've mapped a lot of their shared parameters and things like this. But all this lot all needs basically to work together. So Build and Smart have this thing called the data dictionary, which allows you to translate from one language to another, or from one countryfication requirement to another.
There's one interesting thing about that, Paul, for parameters, whether you talk about countryfication, certainly something we found out in the work in Russia. Inbuilt parameters obey language tags. So if you fire up a Revit model in the Russian version and you use the built-in parameters, when you open that file in an English one and then save it out, all the inbuilt parameters change language. However, custom ones, anything you've added, don't.
Yeah. But what we can do is we can then do mapping through the data dictionary to say the English custom one, the Russian custom one equals that, and then we can do tools to basically say swap out one for the other and transfer the values. All that sort of stuff in terms of managing parameters and things. I've been writing apps for doing that for years. That's not the problem. Sucking stuff in, bringing stuff from manufacturers, web services. That's the easy bit. It's just getting the standard defined in the first place, which is the whole problem on this. Okay. So the other thing we're doing is we've got this work we're doing with the active plan in terms of creating what we call active SPie. Now, I won't go into this in detail, but really what you're looking at is there's property collections by different sources. We've got this SPie thing which basically defines what they should be called. And that's basically a web service you're going to hold all of those. So you can almost think of like the ANZAR's list of shared parameters that held on a web service database that people could then ask for additional things to be added to. And you will now have a free tool in Revit. You click a button and it says, I need to create this property, or I need to add it to this list of families, and it just does it. Okay, so we're going to do that as a basically create that as a web service which is free for everybody in the UK to use.
Hang on, Paul, because I used to have a really nice little secretary who couldn't spell for her life.
Yeah.
But she managed to add such a lot to her custom dictionary that...
Well, anything that's going into it needs you've got to basically go through a checking,
a vetting
process.
Right.
It's not a random, every bug in the sun can create a parameter and put it in. So basically, what it is there'll be a requesting process. So manufacturers or people want content required. That will be checked. It'll be made sure it doesn't already, it's not already in there because somebody hasn't bothered to look properly. And then, if it is a requirement, it will be added in there. Okay, but really we're looking at this whole big picture in terms of driving this from libraries, property definitions, manufacturers, and the whole idea is that when you move stuff from projects into life cycle models, if then somebody looking at the life cycle, the client section needs to go back to the manufacturer's information, that because the formats are all exactly the same, you can actually go in and get that. The general idea is, the reality is, you shouldn't need to put everything into a shared parameter. Because if you've got a single tag, and the tag's the same on the manufacturer's website, and you can basically just go from the tag on that object to the manufacturer's thing and get all the data they hold against it, or the designer holds against it, or whoever holds it, the installer holds against it. If everybody's using the same data structures, then we can get all this lot to work. Okay, so this is one of the tools we've got. So we've put in a lot of the product data sets that have been created by CIBSe, some of the evidence content and stuff like that. Again, the first thing we're doing next week is agreeing standards, and basically that's going to take several months, but we're getting the tools in place sort of when we then start populating that. The idea is from that, things like you could export a predefined set of shared parameters based on stuff you want. So you can basically go through, list all the products you would have, all the properties that should apply to them, and do that. Manufacturers can basically have a similar tool, which will basically give them out either a database or a web service tool, which basically gives them all the data they need to populate, so other people can then reach their data through the other tools we provide. So basically we're linking it all through web services to desktop tools to basically drive this into a common standard. Okay, so really we're looking at object naming, attribute naming, shape naming, sorting out this property information exchange on objects. Then we're going to populate those with product data templates produced by CIBSe, MDS, all the other sort of people. Obviously the whole tie-in is obviously building smart, IFC, COBie. We're looking at that's our standards that we look after. And obviously we're also tying in what's going on with digital plan of works and other things that are happening. The whole idea is that basically, if this is going to work for level 3, we've got to basically sort out this whole big data thing and get everybody at least called in a rectangle the right things. Okay, so had a lot of things going on. It's all looking at, now proposes to move it all to an ISO standard, this to get adopted nationally. The UK, the team we're working with, we're ahead of the game on this, but the idea is we'll give away the tools that we create free, so that the other Building Smart international chapters can then basically take that on and develop it for their own countries.
Oh, you take one step to the right.
You're all right.
The other thing we're looking at is then obviously basic things like certification of objects. So at the moment, everybody keeps talking about, are objects correct? Are the objects I'm putting into my models actually what I should be using? And, the whole sort of validation of data and things like that is a big issue. So those are sort of things, by having a standard, we can then start validating, doing tools to validate against that standard. And by having all the data values and requirements and links to manufacturer stuff all aligned with web services, we can check that and run that. And then you've got things like BIM Smart Data Dictionary, model view definitions, checking for IFC, BIM collaboration format, all that sort of stuff to report on it. So,
is that aligned with MBL and what they're producing and knocking out?
No. They're working at UK level. Yeah. So Ian Chapman and Stefan Mordew and Drew and that lot are all aware that I'm doing this, and they'll be at the Building Smart meeting next week with that. A lot of what I've done actually...
They're delivering the digital plan of works for us, and they're setting up the LOD and alignment with their library.
We're doing the standard tools, but we're not creating the content, so they're content.
But they're leading it from the government's perspective and putting it through. Shouldn't it all be tied in?
We can suck their stuff in. We've sucked in some of their stuff as test data, but we're not creating the data, so we're not creating the product data templates and that. We're just creating the tools and the standards that they all should comply with. Okay. The trouble with the MBS stuff, it doesn't even comply with BS 8541.
Why not?
One came before the other.
No. Richard Waterhouse is the chair of the BS 555 committee. Who, they stand up there telling you all this stuff, but they don't comply with it because they don't know how to read it.
So what are we meant to do then?
Yeah, this is the problem. So the sort of stuff that's going on is hopefully we'll get this stuff out there. The way that I've written the documents are more as guidelines, so based on for users to be able to understand it, as opposed to if you've ever read an ISO type document, you haven't got a hoping hand in understanding what you're supposed to do with it. And I sit on various ISO committees writing this stuff. So I've taken the other approach and done it from a user's perspective and said these are the reasons you need to do it. On the basis we can then get an agreement in the ISO, because people can then understand it from a user's perspective, not from an ISO specialist perspective. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of concerns with tying in with the MBL, because actually the stuff that I've got is actually closest to what they've done than the BS's. But without getting into the technicalities of it all. Okay, so I've moved from sorting out people's individual Revit problems and how to get a couple of shared parameters and the same thing to trying to sort it on a global standard. And next week we've got people from all over the world coming around to discuss this. And we'll see how that goes. The draft will be out to various people from sort of 1st of April. And
is that the draft of the ISO report?
No, it's a draft of the guidelines, and then the proposal is that will then it will take it some time to go. The idea is though the BRE will then start using that within the UK.
Bad data release that, Paul. Bad data release that.
Yeah. I won't be the first. I'll wait a couple of weeks just to make the safe side. Okay. Any questions?
Yeah, the idea of linking to the manufacturer's website to go back and get manufacturer's history,
Yeah.
etc., etc. Nice idea. How are you going to make sure that manufacturers, A, keep that content available for 10, 15 years?
Right, so the basis of that is we're going to do like if you've been to BRE, we have there's a room which is basically every piece of wood you can sample you can get. Okay, so basically we're almost thinking of a British library for BIM objects. So every time a manufacturer puts stuff up and puts it on their website, we'll capture a copy of it and have a date stamped version sitting on our server.
But then that's duplication, it's not a single source of the truth, is it?
Yeah, well the thing is you should go back to the manufacturers, but if you can't get to that, then we hold the record copy.
Well, that's it now. I mean, manufacturers go bust, change their names, and website links get broken on a daily basis.
Yeah.
So-
So start providing that as a service and no longer a charity.
The BRE is a charitable trust. But we're not stopping you extracting all the shared parameters into your stuff and holding it in there, or holding it in your COBie file or in your IFC file or to your own database systems. All we're saying is by the tools on how you get to this data and use it are up to you, the industry, to basically come up with.
Well, speaking of the industry, I guess one of my things about building smart and all this big picture thinking that we do in rooms like this with a company like this is, can we all honestly say, because I'll put my hand up first, do any of your teams know what we're talking about now?
Yeah.
Like, exclusively the whole of your office, in the professional side of things, not the side. Clued up what BRE are talking about, what you're talking
Probably
about.
not, no.
So I guess my question is, when does this message get put across to our respective disciplines and industries through main press? Through AJ, front page, this is what the BRE are doing.
We're doing things with manufacturers. So we're doing there's trial projects. So
I've not spoken to a manufacturer yet who knows what PDT is.
Yeah.
And I speak to them weekly.
Okay.
So the messaging
But
getting out.
it depends who you speak to with manufacturers. So the other thing BRE do, so we test products, we burn things, we do all sorts of, blow them up, so we have all this data for manufacturers that we hold. Now the problem that we have is that if you want to test a certificate on a product, so you've got a BIM object, at the moment we can't give you the data we have of all the test stuff we've on that because it's not in the right format. What we're trying to do is create the mechanism that basically you can just get information. Now, you don't need to know about all the data structures and everything else that's going on behind that, but if we can just set this up as a standard, you don't have to think of what your shared parameters are called, because basically you just say, these are the ones that I should get, and basically populates tools for you. And you say, well, I need this information about the rating of this object, and it just gives it to you. And that's or it gives you a list of manufacturers, and you can get that. That's what you want as users. You don't need to know about what's going on under the hood.
So to clarify, the you in that is us, the consultants, doing that for the manufacturer. Because I couldn't even get CAD detail from a lighting manufacturer that we use regularly.
Yeah.
A CAD detail, at the last resort. We're not even going to go into that. Manufacturers can't currently produce in Revit CAD details of the accuracy that they've originally done in AutoCAD and whatnot because it's 0.5 level. So are we doing that? Are we regurgitating that information?
No, the whole point is all this data should come from the manufacturers. But at the moment, the manufacturers haven't got. Pardon?
And if they're not signed up because they're not in bed, how would it ever work? So we see the NBL, the NBS.
Yeah.
It's Kingspan, it's Canal, it's the big boys.
Yeah.
But
at the moment, they have to pay NBL a bloody fortune to create the stuff for them.
And that's why it's cost prohibitive, and that's why it's not uptake.
Yeah. So basically, we're creating a free tool that they can have that they can do it, and you can create your light blob. You can say it's this manufacturer's thing, suck their data on it, bang, done.
You've only got to look at how many manufacturers will give you CAD details. So, and it's again, it's I don't know what percentage is, but probably 50%.
But at the moment, it's so difficult for them to do it.
What, for AutoCAD?
Well, no, for Revit, etc.
Give a look at AutoCAD details. If half of them can't produce those,
what you've got to remember is these are the time, and I'm at the time, where you used to pay for Reba CAD.
Yeah.
And Reba, you used to pay your £80 and you used to get manufacturers would have their stuff drawn and you'd use it like electronic Electroset. And then who took it over? Fast Track took it over. RB something or the other, they were, weren't they? And Fast Track started doing it. And then they've started doing BIM stuff now. But unless you get the buy-in, unless the manufacturer sees that there's a worth in it,
and manufacturers don't know what standard to go to. Do I go to BIM Objects? Do I go to BIM Store? Do I go to National BIM Library? So if all three of those are all working to the same standard, then it doesn't matter who they go to, because the data for you is going to be the same.
Well, and then there's all the ones, the offshore ones that use quite a lot of TAT as well.
Yeah.
I don't know how to use Revit and use connectors to join hangers onto pipes and stuff like that.
Other ones are just basically put all the AutoCAD blocks into
and put all the threads on bolts and stuff along the way.
But you're always going to get that, aren't you? You're always going to get the TAT. You're always going to get the badly made family.
Buy that. They've actually bought that and tried to sell it as their, or to market it, not sell it, to market it as their, oh look, we've got some BIM objects now for you, so you can do all your pipe work.
Can I actually ask who wants this information? Simple question, who wants this information? Because if you're putting that in design, you get procurement, that'll all get thrown in the bin.
Well, we're getting lifts that are 750 megabytes each. Right?
But what I'm saying is, why do you want manufacturer's content when all you're doing is a performance specification? We want something that will really reach this level of lumens in this area, this length. You actually only need a rectangle with 3 properties on it, because everything else is going to get thrown out at procurement. So they're going to say, that takes 6 weeks, we can get one in 3 weeks from this manufacturer, thank you, throw it all away. All they need to know is how many are there, where is it, and what actually is it representing.
But isn't that type of Revit? If you design one of those light fittings, and then someone comes along and goes, oh, I can get one from B&Q for half price, they throw that one out, they swap it over, and the information is swapped over. So
but it's a performance
thing. So whether you put that in a design, and it has the information to allow you to go and procure the information,
but who's going to put
as long as all the manufacturers build
who's going to put that information in? I'm saying it's not the designer.
But it's not performance always. Yeah, again, are we talking in a room where we're all doing D&B and PFI and it's all performance? Or some of us are doing descriptive specifications. Some of us are actually building things with things, and we need those things. So, and no one's going to be that out, rouse on here. So, like...
Well, I represent the client for you the hell out of it as well,
so, so it's not... I think BIM in itself is totally geared towards those types of jobs, those types of contractual agreements. The shift to us all doing domestic home scale work in Revit with canal downloadable stuff from MBL, it's all a bit of a nonsense, really. It's a nonsense. You're right. We shouldn't be going to the nth degree pre.
It's like somebody mentioned the days of CAD libraries. I'm not, when you go back to CAD, it's like, why do you really need to be able to tell a basin is Twyford's or somebody else's? Well, you need to know a basin fits in this and this spacing. The rest is taken care of afterwards, because someone's going to say, typically in large volume residential, they're going to turn around and go, well, we want 4,000 of these or 4,000 of those. It won't come down to...
On the alternative, I did a lot of work on special needs disabled adaptations. And you were down to, whether you had 5 mil differences on traps to get pipe work to falls and all this sort of stuff. So when you're modelling to that level of detail, you do need to know absolutely everything about it.
I mean, some of the things that do get missed out that we all probably add is performance and health and safety data. Yeah. That is, you go into a standard family and add in zones of influence because they're useful for something other than direct visualizations, actually for analysis of your design. You actually say, we need this much space around an object, you add it to the family. no manufacturer is ever going to put that in. So you're always going to go in and say, right, I'm just going to do a generic pipe, and the access zone for maintenance is this, then I can figure out where to put my access panels. And it'll be a generic access panel to meet a generic pipe until you actually get to procurement and then final design, which is never going to be in the hands of the designer.
It's not always true. Sometimes you are specific in the design as to what type of pipe materials, because only certain pipe materials will be suitable for certain jobs.
But you can still get it from different manufacturers, so as you were saying before, that will change. You can still go to different manufacturers to get the same performing piece of kit from that material. It's not just one manufacturer, with the exception of Zaha's Italian concrete, that's in one place in the world. That's another bun fight. But it's the next stage on beyond design, is that who's really going to fill that data and who's going to go and change it later, and do you really want to go and update an entire Revit model with a change in hand drivers?
We do.
Visually.
No, we do.
So you can have a generic place that says this is a hand drive.
Yes, but when you're working, again, it depends on your client and your job. But speaking where I am currently, I move a lot. It's all residential, developer-led. We want to know what it's going to look like from the very
Exactly.
get-go, and it's working to the tolerances Paul just mentioned. We're at stage 2, 3, and we're thinking about these things working to the minimum London housing standards.
And I think that's the challenge we're always going to have in manufacturers. We all do have requirements. I want a cube, you want an accurate model of a hand drive.
Yeah.
You're never going to be able to satisfy both. Except at a data level, which is what we are talking about, names and parameters, that would be useful. But geometry, you can argue from here to the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think the data you could agree on saying, so that when you do, no matter where you get it from, it's always length from width.
And so I think BRE need to make this an industry thing, not a BIM geek thing.
Yeah. It's a whole lot. It's an international. It's based on an ISO International Object Standard.
But it's the as
So basically,
You're
everybody
in
will
the
know.
shadows. You are not. You like I'm speaking from my office now.
Yeah.
You are in the shadows. No one knows better.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, you do now, so you can actually spread the word.
But
Yes, and I do. And you know what? They all sit there and go, "This is great, Kieran." You go to your thing
But
and it's there,
everybody's-
pizza, and you can come back and board. And I do, but they just glaze over because they want to talk about little fiddly details with this thing from so and so and this thing from so and so. That's what gets them going. That's what gets them excited.
Yeah.
And this isn't transparent or in front of them.
This is just an awareness that it's happening. You don't need to do anything about it. Hopefully, this will take adoption at an international level. We'll get buy-in from all the countries who are members of the Building Smart international chapters. Get them in. It'll be pushed to an ISO. Then there'll be pressure on object manufacturers to comply with it. Manufacturers of products will then start using it. The tools will be made available to them, and then it's going to be probably a couple of years before it then starts to feed down into the objects which you start to use.
So,
But at least there is a vision and there is a proposal to actually get this thing to a point where it could actually at some point in the future actually work.
I think what's been said here is trying to find a practical application of this stuff. One, we're not aware of it, and it's not out there. I fully support what's saying. What we maybe need is some short-term guidelines about managing content.
Yes.
This is fundamental to what we're trying to do, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
And there isn't that infrastructure there to be able to do it. Maybe we need a short-term plan that can be communicated out. I'd like to know, what do we need to do tomorrow to take, what do we take from this? What is the guidance? What should we be doing?
Well, I can come back after we've got feedback from the international stuff and push stuff out and actually go through and talk through the details of the sort of things we're talking through.
But it's fundamental at level 2.
Oh yeah.
And there's a huge gap here.
I think one of the areas we need to be really careful of is that we don't go into too much detail. The detail has to be right to fit the phase or the handling. So particularly when I was at HOK, I was really keen to keep generic objects in the design as long as possible.
Yeah.
Because a generic object is easy to change. Yeah? But once you go specific, let's say you go to a specific manufacturer, or you go to a manufacturer's piece of Revit content that's got, let's say, 30 parameters in it that have been populated. Once you've got that in your model, essentially you've then got to QA and quality check that model. So as long as you can, keep it generic, and particularly kind of the discussions around, it could get swapped out in procurement, it could end up being another manufacturer. And are you going to go backwards and change it because now it's a different manufacturer? Actually, what gets handed over is a big question. And is it the model that's getting handed over with some associated data, or does all that data need to be in the model? And I think the industry has maybe a misconception at the moment that because potentially the manufacturer's data and the detailed models could be available, they could be available much earlier in the design process. I actually think that's possibly a mistake that the industry is making at the moment, is that there is a time and a place for that content, but it is certainly not during the design process, in the early days of design.
It depends who you are. It depends what part of the industry you're talking about. There's certain clients or parts of the industry, whether it's hospitals, whether it's airports, train stations, certain things will be the same at preliminary design throughout. And that's it. Yeah. So whether that information is there, and whether it's a specific shape, and whether it's manufacturer specific, perfect, because that stops any fanning about later on. But there are times when you want generic stuff, but it's got to contain the right data for the right relevant data handovers.
And the digital plan of work should define that information.
Yeah.
It should be defining what we need to hand over at the various stages, the graphical and non-graphical information. And when that comes out, that should be that should help the situation.
But yeah, I mean, my view, dumping data into Revit or stripping data out. I've written applications for all sorts of clients doing that. It's easy, okay, as an application developer. The consequences, as Miles has said, of having too much data early on within models can actually really impact on your performance and that. You want information when you're making decisions and that. I don't think you need that information within Revit, but you need to be able to go and get that information. So we need linked open data that we can get to, so if we make decisions, not necessarily put all that data inside Revit. And that's why I'm trying to drive this whole thing.
So a question as well, Paul. Obviously a bit naive here on this one, but if we've got COBie and we've got SPie, what does the product data template bring that isn't supposed to be covered by those two information exchanges?
So
Okay, I'll answer that because it's about the PDTS, which is not what Paul is covering. So the PDTS,
but no, you mentioned it, and BRE are looking after it, so they're producing.
But they are looking more at the attributes and object data, which is a subset of what the PDTS aim to be. So I'll just give a brief PDTS product data templates. Started a few years ago, CIBSe, trying to do something very simple. It's when we have a particular type of product, let's say a pump, there is no standard at the moment that defines what information we should be able to get from any manufacturer in order to be able to compare apples to apples.
Isn't that what SPie does?
No, because SPie, the problem with the SPie is that it's not specific enough. It just says, so we have something like voltage, and then we have the dimension of the gas connection. But it lumps them all together. There is no, so wait, what do I need for a pump? SPie doesn't give you that. SPie gives you, well, pick the ones you need. What the product data templates do is trying to allow you to go to a site and compare one thing from one manufacturer to the same type of product from another manufacturer.
They're almost like a filter. The product data are a filter of what groups of attributes you need to get hold of.
Mm-hmm. And then from there is bespoke product information that the manufacturer can make available that is not covered by any of those parameters, and that's fine too. But there is a set which is mandatory for those manufacturers to provide. And that's what activity is.
The only thing I'd say to be cautious about is we've run large technicians that do maintenance on a day-to-day basis, and the PDT, most of it is irrelevant to them. And so there's useful information, and they know, but obviously we're specific because we have our own teams that know our sites inside out, and
Right.
they know their infrastructure and assets inside out.
So the PDTS.
But the reality is, if there's something goes wrong with the boiler,
Yeah.
they'll know obviously when it's there. But what they'll do is they'll go over to it, they'll say, okay, that's not working, that fan's not working, and they'll ring up the manufacturer and they'll say, I've got this fan on this manufacturer, this model of boiler, get me a replacement. And that's how it works. So when we run that by and say, you've got all this, what type of the fan, what materials the fan, what's the rating, what's the frequency, and all that stuff, they just go, we don't need that.
No,
So I'm just
that's-
saying, the danger is I know it's really good, and the amount of information that's on there. And if you're saying it's more detailed than SPie, but SPie covered the right amount of detail, is there a need for the product data templates to go to so much detail?
Yeah, well, the thing about the product data templates is that it's a tool for the manufacturers to join BIM as it were. Because it allows them to provide information that they are the ones who generated in the first place. And that information at a designer or a designer level, you might only be interested in some of it. Then as a constructor, you might be interested in other bits of it. As a facilities manager, you might be interested in yet a smaller part of it, different to all the others. And the abilities for a manufacturer to generate that information is the cost is down to zero. Yet the value that it provides by having a standard that is equal to all the other manufacturers of the same type of product is huge, because then we can start automating and comparing things in a way that it's not possible if all that information, while existing, sits in all different types of formats. And that's the value of the PDTS.
Paul, you open to a question about building smart and IFC?
Yeah, go on.
They mentioned about June for their update on infrastructure.
Yeah.
Is that actually going to happen? Or is it going to be put off?
Right, so I don't know where you got your information from, but
Building smart.
who are building smart?
So I'm not going to drop your own guys in it.
There's only 3. And I'm one of them.
I was actually going to ask how many of you are working on this in building smart. Now you told me, didn't have to ask that question.
Actually, there's 4. I forgot about that. So yeah, so we have a project looking at IFC for infrastructure, but it's a pilot project which finishes in June, which is basically just scoping out where we think the gaps are. So we're not going to complete IFC for infrastructure by June. All we're going to say is these are the gaps that we need to basically fill. And we're working with the Environment Agency, so they want to know things like an IFC definition of a fish trap, a mud flat, things which change and evolve as tide goes in and out, and all these floodplains. So they're whole new concepts to the IFC family. So we're looking at extensions, 4+ and the whole structure, as well as all the basic objects which are missing. So yeah, that's another job I'm doing as well as this one. Okay.
Right, we can kind of bring that to a close, but not.
Alan, are these presentations going to be made available?
Yeah, you're happy for us to have your presentation. Paul, your presentation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish with an applause to Paul, which we didn't give before.